Hello and welcome to Material Girls, a pop culture podcast that uses critical theory to understand the zeitgeist. I'm Hannah McGregor.
And I'm Marcelle Cosman. And Hannah, I have a question for you.
What is that question? I want to know.
Okay, what do you remember about the embodied experience of watching television back in the 90s? Early 90s. So before streaming, before torrenting, before you could even buy a series or a season of a television show on DVD.
I personally remember finding the attempt to follow a particular series very stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you were going to watch it, it was like you had to be there at that day, at that time. And I was a kid, I didn't have an agenda.
No.
I wasn't good at time management. And so if there was a thing that I really wanted to follow, like when the English dub of Sailor Moon made its way to Canada, and it was narrative. It was, unlike a lot of other shows I'd watched as a kid, it was you know, ideally wanted to watch the episodes in order to follow the arc.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember being really stressed by the idea of oh shit, oh no, it's 5 o'clock. I have a place to be.
Grade 3 Hannah's going, oh shit, on her way home.
Oh shit, better hurry.
Yeah.
Oh, what about you?
I mean, that experience that you're describing is exactly what I remember, right? And sometimes you would go to watch a thing and it wouldn't be on. And why
there's
wasn't
no way to find out why?
Why wasn't it on? There's no way to know. And you're like, I don't, but it's not here. This is the channel. This is the time, but the show is not here.
Same bat channel, same bat place. And yet
no bat show.
No bat show. I remember, this isn't about TV, but it still feels applicable, having a conversation with a friend about how much I loved the movie The Last Unicorn when I was a kid, and how I would just take it out from our local movie place over and over and over again, because I just always wanted to be watching it. And this friend was like, why didn't you just buy a copy? And I was like, it was the early 90s.
Where would you didn't buy a copy?
Buy movies.
Also,
there was no internet, and buying a movie cost $500.
I know. If you were lucky, you would get one of those Columbia House packages in the mail, and you could peel off the stamps to choose the movies that you could order from Columbia House, and they would be 99 cents.
Yeah. All the VHSs we owned as a family, we got through a promotion that Burger King had.
I think we've talked about this before. This is coming back to me. That's incredible.
Yeah. So it was a real project to follow a show.
Yes.
And if you missed an episode,
you're fucked.
Just get your... Okay, Marcelle, what does this have to do with our object of study today?
Oh, well, we'll get there. We got to move to the next segment.
Okay. It is time for Why This, Why Now? The segment that asks the materialist question, what are or were the historical, ideological, and material conditions for our object of study to become zeitgeisty? I have a feeling we're talking about a television show, Marcelle. Is that true?
That is so true, Hannah. Yes, absolutely.
Whew.
Okay, so next important question. Hannah, what do The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, Lana Del Rey, and the Netflix series Riverdale all have in common?
I feel like Lana Del Rey and Riverdale have a sort of shared, nostalgic 50s vibe. I don't know. I've never seen or played Link's Awakening. So is it also set in the 1950s?
I don't know. Maybe. I've also never played it. I picked 3 things that I don't know jack shit about.
Oh, incredible.
But what's incredible about this combo is that all 3 of these have been inspired by today's object of study, Twin Peaks, the television show. And they're not alone. Twin Peaks is widely understood as one of the most influential TV series ever. Award-winning film critic Gabrielle O'Brien, for example, refers to the show as, quote, the blueprint for quality TV, end quote. Twin Peaks has been so influential that it would actually be impossible to list everything that it has influenced in the time we normally allot to this segment. So instead, Hannah, could you kindly read this wee summary of the show's influence that has been written out by Julie Grossman and Will Scheibel?
Quote, "The series has been credited with influencing the science fiction FBI procedural The X-Files, Fox 1993 to 2002, the myth-building mystery Lost, ABC 2004 to 2010, and the detective drama The Killing, AMC 2011 to 13, and Netflix 2014. One list cites these in addition to 17 other titles. Episodes on series such as The Simpsons, Fox 1989 to present. God, that's a long time. And Sesame Street, PBS 1969 to present,
Even longer,
have spoofed and paid homage to Twin Peaks, ensuring its canonicity in popular culture." End quote.
Even Sesame Street, Hannah. Even
Absolutely
Sesame
incredible.
Street.
We know that children love a reference to another pop culture property.
Twin Peaks has been so influential that when Netflix acquired the series in, I think, around 2010, and I was finally able to watch it, I suddenly felt like I understood a whole era of references that had previously just gone over my head.
Wow.
And that episode of The Simpsons that Grossman and Scheibel are referring to, I watched the show and was like, oh my God, this suit burns better.
Wow. Having not seen Twin Peaks, I don't get any of the references, but now I really feel like I should.
Well, so listen, it is kind of scary, and I know that you have an aversion to scary shows.
I don't like scary.
I know.
I don't like to be scared.
Yeah, I know. But also, I really think it's important to note that as people around our age and younger probably wouldn't have seen it because it was originally broadcast in 1990 and we would have been too young to watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was 6. I will say my parents did let me watch The X-Files when it was on air. So we weren't a strict family when it came to acceptable ages for watching things, but 6, probably too young for Twin Peaks. Probably wasn't up that late.
I remember being too scared by the commercials for The X-Files when it first came out to watch it, but I did start watching it like a year or two later. So the thing about Twin Peaks, and that makes it a little bit different, it's not just that it's a little scary, but it's more that the subject matter of the series is like distinctly adult.
Okay. Sexy?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. It's like soap opera sexy. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So yes. But it's mainly that the show centers on the murder of a teenage girl named Laura Palmer. And also the way that murder shatters the idyllic facade of her hometown. So
okay.
I'm not saying that no kids watched it ever, because the first season was hugely popular, and, you know, parents sometimes let their kids watch a show that they like, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But at its core, I think that the show is really about gender-based violence.
Okay, yeah.
It's weird, and it's surreal, and it's melodramatic, and somehow also manages to be extremely funny while doing those things. But over the course of the show, the viewer realizes that the antagonist isn't a person so much as like a rotten core of violent and powerful men with some paranormal stuff mixed in.
Man, that's just the world, isn't it?
It is. It is the world, and the world is too adult for a 6-year-old.
The world is too adult for a 6-year-old. Okay, yeah, I can see how that would be a bit much for a kid to weigh in on.
Mm-hmm. I've slipped into talking about content, so for the uninitiated, let me start over.
Back to context.
Back to context. Twin Peaks was a television series originally broadcast on network television, ABC to be specific.
Mm-hmm.
The show was created by Mark Frost and David Lynch, the latter already a known auteur, having made films like The Elephant Man in 1980 and Dune in 1984, among a bunch of others.
Okay.
And as many expected from a David Lynch co-created show, Twin Peaks absolutely shattered the generic expectations of primetime television. The show has been analyzed as a noir soap opera by Grossman and Scheibel. It's been analyzed as science fiction by Talat. It's been analyzed as horror by Jowett and Abbott. And even as a U.S. frontier myth by Carroll. It's also been described as camp, and boy howdy, is it campy.
Ah, I love camp. That is a lot of different genres, and a lot of genres that I enjoy.
Yeah.
One that I enjoy. Two, camp and sci-fi I enjoy.
That's one genre that you enjoy.
That's a lot of genres, and one of them is what I enjoy.
The 2-hour pilot aired on Sunday, April 8th, 1990 on ABC. Hannah, could I ask you to please read the next quote from Grossman and Scheibel?
Absolutely. Quote, when the 2-hour pilot aired at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, an increasing number of viewers tuned in every half hour, reaching a total audience of around 35 million, a 33% market share, or a third of the people watching television from 9 to 11 p.m. End quote.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A third of all people who watch TV watch that pilot. That's wild.
That's wild, right? To put it another way, David Bianculli explains that, quote, 2-hour opener drew enough viewers to make it the highest rated telemovie of the 1989 to 1990 season, end quote. Now, for ABC, those ratings were a huge deal.
Was ABC not getting those kind of numbers?
Mm-mm. So I don't want to anthropomorphize a television network, but I will, because
none of us want to anthropomorphize a television network, Marcelle.
This poor little guy had been losing ratings to Goliath, NBC's must-see TV primetime block for like a decade, okay?
Oh, poor guy.
Poor guy. ABC scheduled the first season of Twin Peaks for Thursdays at 9 p.m. opposite NBC's Cheers, which was a big deal. And according to Grossman and Scheibel, quote, episode 1 garnered the highest rating ABC had seen in 4 years during that time slot, end quote.
Okay, just to clarify, are you distinguishing between the pilot, like that 2-hour pilot, and episode 1?
Yes. So the pilot aired on the Sunday. That was the telemovie.
Okay.
And then episode 1 was the one that first aired on Thursday, opposite Cheers. Yeah. It's also worth noting with Twin Peaks that there was a lot of what Bianculli calls, quote, pre-launch hype, end quote.
So articles in TV Guide?
More. So viewers were really primed to be blown away. I'll give you one sort of infamous example. It was a full-page ad in the New York Times featuring a pull quote from a different review. And it read, quote, Twin Peaks, the series that will change TV, end quote.
What a bold claim.
A bold claim, indeed.
Did it deliver on this bold claim?
The verdict is that unequivocally, Twin Peaks absolutely changed television. It changed the direction of television for the foreseeable future. So the pilot introduced the overarching problem and, dare I say, conceit. Who killed Laura Palmer?
Gotcha.
And this question, captivated audiences immediately. Bianculli adds that the, quote, increasingly paranormal subplots kept viewers involved and guessing in different ways, end quote. Hannah, I would like to ask you to read the next quote from Bianculli, please.
Quote, after a couple of episodes, the audience leveled off. The viewers who remained, though, were a loyal core, delighting in Lynch's otherworldly dream sequences and playing along at trying to unravel, or at least follow, the various plot threads. Classic. The national media enjoying and propelling the ride, geared up to Who Shot JR levels all over again.
That's a reference to Dallas.
Oh, cool. Thanks. Yeah. Newsweek and People ran elaborate flowcharts tracing the characters' intricate relationships, establishing a symbiotic bond between Twin Peaks and magazines that would continue through 1990. By the end of the year, Time had run a cover story on Lynch, and actresses from Twin Peaks had graced the covers of Playboy, Rolling Stone, TV Guide, and, fittingly, a photography magazine titled Exposure, end quote.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I feel like this is kind of establishing some of the playbook for the way that we watch prestige TV now.
Yes, I think that is exactly right. What's wild, though, is that then the show flopped.
Did it get bad? Like, what happened? What did they?
It
What?
was super successful. It was super successful. And then it flopped.
And then it flopped. Too scary, too weird, too like what was where did they go wrong, Marcelle?
These are great questions and the subject of much debate and discussion.
I bet.
So Twin Peaks was immensely popular, had a demonstrable cultural impact that continues to this day, and a devoted fandom, but it wasn't commercially successful. And what I think is really interesting is that this failure to succeed as mainstream, I think that this is essential context for theorizing the show's zeitgeistiness.
Yeah. So it's like the cultural impact is in part due to its commercial failure.
Yes, I think so. Bianculli, to quote again, for example, says, quote, "It's partly because of the attention-getting rise and fall of Twin Peaks and the astonishing speed of its overall trajectory that it remains so strongly in critical, creative, and collective memory," end quote.
Huh. That's so interesting. So it's like there's two versions of zeitgeistiness at work here, right? There's like its intense popularity in its moment, and then its sort of later cultural impact, which in part became possible because its popularity fell off so precipitously.
Yeah.
So interesting. Okay, so do we know anything about the kind of material conditions that like thwarted the show's success?
There's like one really big cluster of problems, and I wish I knew a sexier way to phrase this, but ABC just kept rescheduling it.
Oh yeah, they like were bouncing it around time slots, yeah?
And days.
And days. Oh. Oh, okay. Okay, can you give me some examples?
Yeah. So you remember part of this exciting arc of Twin Peaks is that it finally gave ABC a competitive Thursday night show,
TV,
right?
Thursday night.
Exactly. The finale of season 1 aired on May 23rd, 1990. And that, Hannah, was a Wednesday.
Well, there's
It was a Wednesday.
no such thing as must-see Wednesdays.
Nobody watches TV on Wednesdays.
It is really odd how at some point everybody agreed that Thursday was going to be the TV day.
I mean, we should probably do an episode about how NBC like created that with its must-see TV Thursday night block. That would be a whole other thing. But yes, totally. Yes.
Okay. Wednesdays. Absurd.
Absurd, right?
So was there something else that ABC was broadcasting on Thursdays now? Like, did they have to move it or?
I don't know. I did a light Google of like, what happened on Thursday, May 24th, 1990? Like what was coming up? What was coming down the pipes? The only thing I could find is that on Thursday, May 24th, 1990, it was the Stanley Cup final. And so maybe that played a role, but ABC didn't broadcast the NHL until 1993. So it's not because ABC needed to broadcast the final. It's that perhaps ABC was worried that the season finale couldn't compete with the Stanley Cup final.
How many episodes does the first season have? Because the pilot was April 8th, 1990, and the finale was May 23rd, 1990. That's a very short season.
It has 7. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, very short first season.
That's also really interesting because, again, that's something that, like, contemporary prestige TV does. But, like, in the early 90s, seasons were, 40 episodes long.
I know. I read that it was a mid-season replacement for something else. I didn't have time to get into the nuts and bolts of, like, what it was replacing and, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a possibility that they were trying to avoid competing with the Stanley Cup finals, which we obviously very important to everybody. Are there other possible reasons why ABC was bouncing the time slot?
I mean, presumably, and I would love for someone to dig into the ABC archives and find out what the absolute fuck was going on, because this kind of shenaniganery continued into season 2, okay? I'll give you another example, which is that ABC opted to broadcast season 2. Again, I need to stress that the success of Twin Peaks on Thursday was like such a boon for ABC, and then they flew too close to the sun. ABC opted to broadcast season 2 on Saturday nights instead of
that's
during
really
the
weird.
week. And Bianculli suggests that the network was trying to use the success of the show to, quote, lure audiences back to Saturday night TV and capture the attention of the weekend home video crowd, end quote. But if that was the plan, it didn't work. The show's ratings suffered. Grossman and Scheibel posit that this scheduling change, quote, foreclosed any water cooler effect, end quote, meaning that people weren't talking about season 2 the way they had been during season 1.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder too if there's some, they had it on Thursday and then numbers dipped and they were like, oh, we're losing people to Cheers again. Like, we can't compete with such a popular slot. So let's try a less popular slot and maybe people will come with us. But then the less popular slots, fewer people watch TV at those times. So then it becomes this sort of cascading effect.
Totally. I think the way that ABC continued to bounce the show around and the consequential, dipping of ratings really lines up with that kind of thinking. Because in February of 91, ABC announced that it was putting the show on indefinite hiatus.
Was this mid-season 2 or before season 2?
This is mid-season 2.
Great. Just put it on hiatus right in the middle of a season. Great move.
Yeah. And then when ABC brought the show back at the end of March of the same year, it brought it back to Thursdays. So it did try to go back to Thursdays.
And there it stayed on Thursdays.
And alas, no, because people were already like, what the fuck is going on with this show?
Oh my God. Imagine trying to follow a intensely narrative arc prestige series when they keep changing the day and time it airs.
Exactly. And not all of the episodes are equally strong. And so picking back up on an episode that's sort of meh, especially if you've missed 1 or 2, or there was a month-long gap in between, so hard to follow.
You can't go back and rewatch the episodes.
Exactly.
Because they aren't streaming anywhere and there's no blogs where people are writing recaps for you.
No, exactly. So then the show is fucked. And then ABC announces that it's going to cancel the show. And then it just aired the last 2 episodes back to back on a Sunday night.
No!
So it was we're not doing this anymore. Just put the last 2 episodes out. We're done. We're done here.
So our hit Thursday show gets rescheduled to Saturdays, does poorly, goes on hiatus, comes back on Thursdays, continues to do poorly, gets canceled. And, in the meantime, they just move the day every once in a while to keep you on your toes.
When there's an important hockey game or something.
And then finally, Saturday. What?
And then that's it. I just really think that for folks who grew up with streaming, it is so hard to wrap your head around how chaotic it is to change a show's broadcast day 3 times in a single season. But just imagine every time you go to watch something on Netflix took it off the day before,
Oh my God.
It's literally impossible to stay on top of it.
And you're well, where is it now? And Netflix is wink.
Well, it never existed.
Whew. Okay. So there's obviously some bullshit going on with this network. Did that extend beyond just their chaotic approach to scheduling?
Yes, definitely. So there were a number of content-related interventions from the network.
Oh, show too weird, network mad?
Frankly, yes, I think so.
I've never watched the David Lynch movie, but I'm sort of aware of his thing. His shtick.
Yeah. But they knew. It's not like he was a secret co-writer, they knew. They knew what they were getting into.
Yeah, but networks love to bring in interesting artists and then be like, sorry, could you be less interesting?
That's exactly it. The network started to pressure Frost and Lynch to solve Laura Palmer's murder much more quickly than they had ever intended. And this might be apocryphal, but I remember reading somewhere that Lynch and Frost never even intended to solve the murder in the first place, that it was the whole conceit of the show was this is an unsolvable murder.
Gotcha.
Not because it's literally unsolvable, but because there's so much other stuff going on.
Yeah.
And from what I can tell, critics and fans are kind of divided on the value of solving that central murder.
Mm-hmm.
So Bianculli describes the Laura Palmer story as frustratingly strung out. But he also quotes Damon Lindelof, who's one of the producers of Lost. And Lindelof said, quote, "Once they told you who killed Laura Palmer, there was no reason to watch the show anymore," end quote.
Certainly a problem that Lost was familiar with.
Oh, the irony.
Oops, our whole reveal got given away. I guess nobody cares anymore.
Another major downside to wrapping up the mystery was that a lot of the paranormal content from season 1, which had to do with the main character, Agent Cooper, like using these paranormal skills to solve the murder in the first place, these were the kind of genre-bending additions that made the show really revolutionary. Mm-hmm. Those things became loose ends once, where it was like, oh, well, it was that guy. Like, why was there an R under her fingernail, David Lynch? Like, it's just, it's so...
So, do we think that, like, ABC was trying to take this show that was celebrated for being unconventional and, like, make it a little more conventional?
Definitely. I think that it was such a new style of televised storytelling that the network just frankly didn't know what to do with it. And thus, its rise and fall have become a cautionary tale that is downright haunting popular culture to this day.
Wow.
What a roller coaster, huh?
What a roller coaster. And I find myself at this moment in our conversation wishing that there was some sort of theoretical framework we could use to think through that sort of inverse relationship between popularity and success. Do you think such a thing might exist, Marcelle?
Hannah, I love that idea, and I think I have just the thing.
Now it's time for the theory we need, and I am on tenterhooks like a fan of a TV show put on indefinite hiatus. I hate when they do that.
I know, right? Okay, so for this segment, I want to first think about Twin Peaks as a cult television phenomenon. Hannah, I would like to ask you to please read this quotation from Robert Holtzclaw as quoted by David Lavery.
With pleasure. Quote, according to Holtzclaw, cult TV is most readily identifiable by, quote, the fervency of a program's audience support, the degree to which its language and catchphrases enter its audience's vocabulary, fans' determination to amass collectibles and memorabilia, and conventions at which like-minded souls can congregate and share their passion, end quote.
Thank you. Excellent. So based on everything we discussed in the previous segment, it won't come as a surprise that Twin Peaks was indeed a cult hit. There is a lot of great analysis of the ways that Twin Peaks blended genre and how effective it was at hooking its audience and influencing the landscape. To go back to Gabrielle O'Brien, for example, quote, Twin Peaks explored this dark territory in a way that had never been done on television. Terms like game-changing and landmark have become overused, but back in 1990, they were apt descriptions for the series that reimagined what television could look, sound, and, perhaps most importantly, feel like, end quote. And O'Brien also very helpfully draws from fan theory scholar Matt Hills. And Hannah, I will ask you to read this next long quotation, please.
Quote, Hills cites endlessly deferred narrative, hyperdiegesis, and auteurism as key elements of occult text. He coined the term hyperdiegetic to explain the fan allure of cult television and story worlds, pointing out that, quote within a quote, only a fraction of any such world is ever actually seen on screen, but by implication it continues coherently and consistently outside the media frame, and the quote within the quote, but continue the larger quote from O'Brien.
You're doing such a good job.
Thank you. In this sense, Twin Peaks is an excellent example of cult television. The universe presented seems hermetically sealed and utterly complete, a fleetingly glimpsed story world that registers as authentic and seems to have a plausible life beyond the immediate plane. Its characters and their bizarre obsessions and idiosyncrasies eye patch wearing Nadine and her silent drape runners, Margaret the log lady with her prescient and ever-present log, Agent Dale Cooper's, Kyle MacLachlan, coffee fixation, offer up a richly colored, irresistible universe that burrows its way into the spectator's imagination and takes root there. End quote. I still don't know what hyperdiegetic means.
You know what? Neither do I.
Okay, cool. I did a quick Google of diegetic. Just real quick. Diegetic and non-diegetic. So like diegetic things are things that are occurring within the world of the fiction on screen, and non-diegetic is like stuff that isn't. So like music, that score that the characters can't hear is non-diegetic music. So hyperdiegetic is just like exactly what this quote says, like really invested in creating the rich life world that we see on screen.
And like doing that in really cool ways. Like sometimes this one character will walk into the diner and put on music, which we hear in the background when other characters come on screen in other scenes, you know? And so it's like, whoa, is this song in the world or is it of the world, you know? And the answer is both.
I keep thinking about this novel I absolutely adore by Hazel Plant called Little Blue Encyclopedia for Vivian. And it's a wonderful experimental novel about a trans woman who is mourning the death of her best friend, who she was also in love with. And she's the protagonist is queer, and her best friend was also a trans woman, but was straight and didn't return her attraction. But at the core of their friendship was their shared love for a weird short-run cult TV show that is definitely based on Twin Peaks, but it's called Little Blue. And in the novel, the protagonist is creating like a fan encyclopedia about Little Blue as an act of love for her friend who has died. So it's Little Blue Encyclopedia for Vivian.
Oh, that's
and
beautiful.
it's this like exhaustive description of the like incredibly specific, weird internal details to this world. And it's such a powerful evocation of like this kind of fandom, right? Where like
absolutely
immersing yourself fully into and following the weird details of a hyperdiegetic world becomes both this act of love for the object, but also a way of sharing love with other people who experience fandom of this thing as well.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Great novel. Everybody go read it. It rules.
I think that fits so elegantly into the way that we're thinking about this television show as a cult phenomenon, because what I'm trying to piece together and still sort of, you know me, I do my theory sections last. And so they're always a little bit like, well, I don't know, feminism. What I'm trying to piece together is a material understanding of the Twin Peaks zeitgeist in which the content is materially relevant, right? Because normally we don't talk that much about content in our analyses of why something became popular because we're a materialist show. We want to know what the conditions were that made it zeitgeisty. But the content of Twin Peaks is so exceptional that it seems to be the material condition that made Twin Peaks zeitgeisty, that and the fact that it was canceled.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Yeah. And the relationship here between content and context is harder to divide out than maybe for some of the other things that we've talked about. Because, like, when it comes to cult television or any piece of pop culture with a cult following, the content is inseparable from its materiality and success and from its challenges, right? From what made it hard for it to find its bearing, what maybe made it commercially unsuccessful.
Absolutely. Yes, that is exactly it.
Okay. All right. I think I can be convinced of this, but I'm going to need you to rephrase it as a thesis statement first.
You know what, Hannah? That's a damn fine idea.
Okay, Marcelle, I'm ready. What's your thesis?
Okay. It is well documented that David Lynch and Mark Frost's television phenomenon, Twin Peaks, changed primetime television forever. Scores of so-called quality television programs, among countless other forms of cultural production, cite Twin Peaks as a key influence. The show's blending of genres, its attention to music, its characters, and the inner world of the town Twin Peaks itself are identified by creatives as a source of inspiration and by fans as points of obsession. What's remarkable, too, is that the show's failures are also cited as influential. Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse, who came up with ABC's Lost, for example, consciously tried to avoid the pitfalls of a meandering storyline. Did they succeed? I don't know. Matt Hills opines that, quote, endlessly deferred narrative, end quote, and story worlds of which we only ever see a fraction on screen are key to cult television. If Gabrielle O'Brien is correct that the world of Twin Peaks is, quote, hermetically sealed and utterly complete, end quote, then surely the show's cancellation by ABC was essential to its status as a cult classic. What narrative is more deferred than the canceled television program? What story world more fractioned than the one taken off air? In this essay, I will argue...
Okay, that's really interesting then, because it suggests that cancellation itself becomes key to cult classic status. And I think we could look at a lot of shows where that seems to be the case.
Absolutely.
That like both the sort of intensity of world creation and then the abrupt ending of narrative, like maybe seeds more intense forms of fandom. I'm thinking of Firefly.
Oh.
The thing is, I'm thinking of Firefly.
Yeah, I mean, Firefly is absolutely, it's an example that was cited in a lot of the things I was reading for this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Also, no one talked about this that I read so far, but I also kept thinking about My So-Called Life and how after that one season, like so many people in our generation were like, but Angela, but Jordan Catalano.
Have you ever come across the argument that our particular micro generation, the like sort of 1980 to 1985, like not quite Gen X, not quite millennial, should be called Generation Catalano? We were so formidably affected by My So-Called Life.
That is perfect. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's amazing to go back to these shows that have been so culturally influential and be like, oh, 7 episodes? Like,
yeah.
So little of this thing that became such a huge deal.
Totally. Because season 2 of Twin Peaks, for all ABC's shenanigans, season 2 was like a proper season length. It was like 22 episodes long.
Okay.
But the impact of season 2, right? It was season 1, those 7 episodes plus the 2-hour telemovie pilot that like radicalized how we think about primetime television.
Yeah. And, as we touched on earlier, really seemed to create a playbook for both for sort of how producers of prestige TV want viewers to engage, but also for like what cult fandom can look like, right? So like thinking about how many contemporary prestige TV shows are trying to create the right balance of immersion and confusion so that you both feel like you're very inside the world and also like you have no idea what's going on because they want you to talk about it with other people and theorize it. And it's a fine line to walk, like Game of Thrones was trying to do this. Like, we want this to be a very immersive world. And we also want you to constantly have to, be going back to work the next day and being like, okay, wait, so what? So what is, who is anybody?
What just happened?
Just
I don't
me?
Understand. I can't trust anybody. They killed Sean Bean.
Oh my God. I don't like it here, but I will watch all the rest of these seasons.
Absolutely. So I wonder if it's worth thinking about, and I know it's tricky because I knew going into the script that you hadn't seen it. And I know that a lot of our listeners will probably not have seen it either. And unlike Reservation Dogs, I am not here to tell you that you have to watch it.
Okay.
Because while I think Twin Peaks was really revolutionary at the time, I think the work that it did was greater than the experience of watching the show might be. So whenever friends of mine tell me that they're going to watch it.
Like Shakespeare, more culturally influential than enjoyable.
Yeah. Similarly, the
Eat
Beatles.
It, Shakespeare. Ooh, shots fired.
My long-standing hill that I will die on is that the Beatles, not that good.
Every once in a while, I will get high and listen to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which is my favorite Beatles album. And every time I'm just like, God, these boys were good at songs. Just smoking a joint like, well done, boys.
Well done,
You
boys.
really made some good songs.
Oh, jeez. Anyway.
That's my high voice.
Anyway, speaking of cult fan favorites, the Beatles, famously a marginalized band, if ever there was one.
Okay, so the challenge here is you're not telling us to watch the show, but also your argument is that the content of the show is part of what's important about it.
I know. And it's tricky. So often when friends tell me that they're going to watch it, because the second season goes so thoroughly off the rails, what I tell people is that when the killer of Laura Palmer sees himself in the mirror, that's when it's time to move on. There's nothing worth watching after. You've solved the murder.
Oh, man.
Everything that happens after that is a bit superfluous. Okay, so here's one of the reasons why I really like the show and think that it is worth watching, even though it's a bit scary, okay?
Oh, my God. Can I guess?
Yeah.
Is there a soft boy at the center of it?
I mean, yeah, Agent Dale Cooper, Kyle MacLachlan's Agent Dale Cooper is absolutely phenomenal. So quotable, so charming, so funny, and such a fundamentally decent person. There's an anecdote, which I'm going to tell you about. And again, part of this might be apocryphal. I'm not really sure. I read a lot of things in quick succession. Apparently, the network wanted Agent Dale Cooper to have a relationship with the character Audrey Horne. The problem is that Audrey Horne was a high schooler. She is a high school girl, and Agent Dale Cooper is a man who works for the FBI. And Kyle,
a full adult man.
A full adult man. And apparently, Kyle MacLachlan was like, no. No, that's bad.
Kyle MacLachlan was like, hey, heads up, gross.
No, we're not going to do that.
You know what? If that is true, good for you, Kyle MacLachlan.
I know. When I was rewatching the series to get ready for this recording, I was paying such close attention because I remembered there being some weird chemistry between them. And it is absolutely true that Agent Dale Cooper finds her attractive and this beautiful woman is flirting with him. But at no point does he ever cross any professional line with her. At no point is he like, well, what's it gonna hurt? You know, just a little kiss. Just a little kiss. He's not that kind of man. And here's why this is important, okay? Buckle up.
No, sorry. I need a little bit more of that
kiss.
Voice.
Just a little kiss.
Marcelle.
That's my bad man voice. Just a little kiss. No?
Okay. Yep. No, I love it so much. Okay, keep going.
Okay, so here's why this is important. I said at the outset that the show is very adult because at its core, it's about gender-based violence.
Yes.
And I maintain this. A lot of women who write about the show talk about how the show hates women. And I think that they have valid arguments. I don't agree with them.
Okay.
What I think the show does very, very effectively is it draws a clear and hard boundary between abusive men and non-abusive men.
Okay.
And I think that that's important because so many of the men in this show are very complicated, but there are bad men and there are not bad men. And Agent Dale Cooper might be complicated. He's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
He might be complicated, but he's not bad because he doesn't hurt women. And for a show in the 90s that revolves around the murder of a teenage girl, I think drawing that distinction very clearly that you can be complicated, you can be morally gray, but that doesn't give you license to be abusive, or that being abusive is not morally gray, that there's like a clear division between these two ways of performing masculinity in this world. That being said, within the non-abusive side, there are all kinds of different masculinities expressed, which I really appreciate. So there's like really like tough guys, and there's like very, very soft boys like Andy. Andy's a cop and he's constantly crying at crime scenes because he's so soft. He's so soft. And wonderful to watch. I love watching men cry, is what I'm saying. Anyway. And so I think that having a central character like Agent Dale Cooper, who is so memorable, so quirky, so fascinating, such a rich character, who is such a character himself, having that person firmly on the line of women are people and not objects for me to tinker with. Or, I don't know. Yeah.
A disgusting choice of words.
So sorry. I think that is also part of what makes the show revolutionary.
And does that hold up throughout the terrible second season?
I think so. So, but I didn't make it all the way through the terrible second season. I think so because that's the season where they introduce a new love interest for Dale Cooper.
Did you watch the reboot?
I didn't. I haven't yet. I want to finish my rewatching before I watch it. There is also a film that they made called Fire Walk With Me, which is a prequel, which they made after the show was canceled because the fans were like, we need to know.
And they were like, psych, we're making a prequel. We'll never tell you anything.
Very David Lynch.
You won't know anything. Yeah, it's so interesting because so many of the ways that you describe this show and so many of the influences it has align with my tastes. Like, I'm very interested in the camp. I'm interested in the surreal. As I mentioned before, I love Little Blue Encyclopedia for Vivian. It's a kind of world that I enjoy. And also, as a consumer of narratives, I am infuriated by loose ends. I want everything to be so, like, I'm reading a book right now, and there's a scene in it. There was a scene in it that I'm not yet convinced will have narrative bearing later on in the book, and I'm preemptively mad about it.
When you see those things,
that was the point of that scene.
You recognize and you're like, this isn't going to do anything. This scene's not going to do any work. It might.
But if it doesn't, I'm ready to be so mad. And I know, like, this is not an inherent aesthetic or narrative quality that, like, it's just one version of how storytelling can work, right? It's Chekhovian, this demand that everything needs to, like, mean something and matter in some way. And Lynch is, like, kind of famously anti-Chekhovian. Like, he's, like, pushing back against that idea of narrative worlds that need to be, like, so internally coherent. Because it's, like, it's so artificial, right? Like, it's not the way that life works.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Isn't that so ironic that, like, mimesis is so much more contrived than like the surreal?
Yes. Yes, 100%. Life is so much more surreal than it is realist.
Absolutely.
And that expectation that art needs to be realist is, like, I mean, I would say that it probably has some material conditions behind it.
Audiences can't hear this, but my eyebrows are wagging. My eyebrows may be wagging, but Hannah, we simply have no time to talk about the material conditions of realism. That's a different episode.
That's okay. I'm actually going to make us make an episode in the future about Titanic and James Cameron's sort of reinvention of realism for the contemporary moment.
Incredible.
Because if anybody has ever fucking had a boner for mimesis, it's that dude.
Boner for the ocean, boner for mimesis.
Boner for mimesis, boner for ocean-based mimesis.
Oh my golly.
I'm gonna make a movie about Titanic. What I'm gonna build the Titanic. Asshole.
Diane, Material Girls is a Witch Please production and is distributed by Acast. Now, Diane, I'm sure you're well aware that you can visit owitchplease.ca to access transcripts, reading lists, and merch. But what you might not know is that this fine team of hardworking, decent people also makes two other shows. The first, Gender Playground, is a podcast about gender-affirming care for kids. A damn fine idea, if you ask me. And let's not forget about Making Worlds, a video podcast. Diane, can you believe it? A video podcast about sci-fi, fantasy, and the radical power of imagining otherwise. Take note of this address. That's O, as in OH, Diane, whichplease.ca.
Need a recommendation for a good cup of coffee and a delicious slice of cherry pie? You'll find honest, reliable tips in our fine newsletter available at ohwhchplease.substack.com. And heck, if you want to help the network brass to renew us for another season, we've got a hell of a Patreon at patreon.com/ohwhchplease. We're also on Instagram, X, and Threads at ohwhchplease, and on TikTok at ohwhchpleasepod.
Thanks to Auto Syndicate for the use of our theme song, Shopping Mall. And of course, thanks to the whole Witch Please Productions team. Our digital content coordinator, Gabby Iori. Our social media manager and marketing designer, Zoe Mix. Our sound engineer, Malika Gumpengum. And our executive producer, Hannah Rehak, aka Coach.
At the end of every episode, we will thank all our new Patreon supporters and every member who's boosted their tier to help us buy coffee and pie. Patreon support is the way we pay our damn fine team. So when we say thank you, Diane, we really mean it. You make this show possible. Our enormous gratitude goes out to Diane, Melanie D, Vicky M, Jordan H, and Katie S. Hey, you four, thank you. We'll be back soon with a whole new episode, but until then...
Later, murder investigators.